Hi folks, hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Ours was great. We had cold mutton and warm lemonade. That went down real good. And then we had a couple vegans come out from town, so I made my famous cow pie casserole. And the advantage of having them around was pretty nice because you're always short on chairs. Well, two of them fit in one chair, so that was nice. And the humor part was when they left, they wanted my recipe, so I just told them I'll get it to them later. But anyway, we had a good time. These are give you a little behind the scenes. This is what all the saddles we get. I hand rub them with this Obanoff salve to prepare them for people, and that's one of the reasons why you can just throw your leg over them when you get them and ride off, because you don't have to break them in. And people seem to like that. And it works, this Obanoff works in humid country, dry country. So that's the go-to. It's invented by a firefighter. So he was dealing with wet boots and really hot boots. So there you go. But today, you know, we've got these email deals going. And I want to cover some, but I want to tell you a little story about when I was in Wyoming. My nephew, Chris, always spent every summer with me, and when he was about 16, I think it was, we went to Brandon Camp, and there was a cow camp in the middle of this ranch down between Arvada, Leiterville, and Claremont. Sherry Vineyard, who was a really good friend of mine. Anyway, we went there and we cleaned one side of the ranch. It was about 40,000 acres before we started. And then we were able to go out and make a circle and gather about 100 pair at a time and come into the cow camp because we had traps set up, of course, small 20, 30 acre plus the corrals to brand in. And we would brand a bunch and then kick them off the other side of the ranch that had been cleaned. And then we'd go out and gather another bunch. So it worked out great. But anyway, Chris, he was 16, so he wrestled the whole time because I never did teach him to rope. But he helped us gather and work cattle and then wrestle, which he was very good at by the time we got done. It took a little over 2 weeks to get everything branded. But I tell you, that was one of the nicest times we ever had together. We slept on the ground, of course, and Buck's brother-in-law approached me about cooking. You know, I don't need to tell you about a camp cook. And he said, if you'll let me bring my horse and help, then I'll cook for you. And I said, you bet. So we'd be gathering, about 10 o'clock he'd peel off and trot back to camp, and we'd get there, we could smell pie, bread. This guy was phenomenal. So, you know, of course, Chris, he ate like a boiled mule back then, so it's a good thing we had a cook. And Toby, who we lost recently, was about the same age or a little old, I don't know. Anyway, they had a night rodeo in Buffalo, Wyoming, so he wanted to leave the cow camp, drive to Buffalo, get on a saddle bronc horse, and come back. And I told him, I said, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be saddling our horses, and you better be here. You're going to get fired if you're not here, and that's all there is to it. So I catch my horse in the morning, I'm walking up towards where we had the saddles, and it looked like a mummy laying on the ground. What he'd done was laid down in front of the hitch rack where we tie the horses so I'd make sure and see him. So I got him up, and he grabbed his horse and went on, you know, that youth thing. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, I really enjoyed the time in the Brandon camp, and it was fun. It worked really well. It's just like a well-oiled machine. So that was a piece of history that I wanted to share with you. So there you go. All right. Now the emails, I want to address them because I got a lot of them because we opened up the door for suggestions, which I'm glad we did, to tell you the truth, because I learned a lot from them. So I'd love to hear Pat's opinion about horses that are anxious or fearful while trail riding, as well as how to slow a horse down that tends to rush home. Much respect and appreciation. Okay, the word anxious and the word rush are the same word. So anxious versus fearful are two different stories. And remember, I don't know you, I don't know your horse, and I'm just going to tell you my opinion. So you know what that's worth. So on the anxious thing, the best thing that I've learned to do with most folks, this was foggy incidentally, so I don't know if that's your brain or where you live, but anyway, the number one thing I do for people that have a horse that's anxious, there's a lot of reasons why it is anxious, but the best, safest way to deal with it is get off and walk real slow like I do. And do not let your horse pass your shoulder. He's going to try to go past you and lead you like a lot of people allow it. You do not allow that. So now you got a horse walking real slow behind you and he's dancing around and acting like an idiot. All you got to do is just keep walking slow. And then after you've gone far enough to either get tired or decide he might want to use his brain, get on. And here's the key. Pitch him the rein. If you're stealing a ride on a horse, that's exactly why he's anxious. So you pitch him the rein, you give him a chance to walk and nod. Okay, he doesn't. Well, get off again. Now, this isn't when you're 30 miles from home. This is proximity. So that's the answer to that one. And the other one is, if you're on flat ground, do a one-rein stop. Disengage the hindquarter. 850 of them, I'll guarantee you can set the reins down, put your hands out, and he will walk. Now, don't wait until he's dancing. Do it just before you feel that impulsion coming up in their body. It can be cured. And it's caused by humans, usually. All right, the other one, fearful. Okay, why is a horse fearful? Well, that's another whole bucket of fish, but the thing is, for fearful, one of my deals, if I got a horse that seems bothered, I just trot them. All right, if you get their feet moving, they don't have time to fall into sin. It's like wrangling horses. Nobody wrangles horses at a walk. All right, so you get trotting across country, now he's got to pick his head up and looking around, which is another email. Let them pick their head up and look around. Okay, if they pick their head up and can look around, that means you actually did pitch them the rein. But if you got a death grip on them reins and that horse is trying to get moving and you're hanging on like you're dying, you just told him something is really wrong here. So it's all, you know, them little round mirrors that you use to put war paint on, carry one of them with you. When things start falling apart, just look in the mirror first, and then okay, if it's truly the horse, then do whatever you need to do. But a lot of this stuff is human caused, and I know there was the owner before you that did it, but matter of fact, that's what I would do. But the one rein stop, I lived in Arivaca, Arizona, which is a pretty small town. There's like 4 buildings. And a woman had an Arab horse there, lived in town, and she said, Pat, I just want to be able to walk my horse through town. Well, that's like a 7-minute walk, okay. So I said, fine. So I took her horse and I headed for the brush, and it started doing that jitterbug deal, and I'd one rein, I'd spin it, I'd one rein stop it. And it came back with the brand of the goat. In other words, it went down far enough on its knees to take the hair off its knees. Well, I felt bad. Anyway, when I got back, I could set the reins on the saddle horn, put my arms out, and walk through town. So I told her to meet me on the edge of town. I said, here, watch me. So she watched me go through town. 3 minutes later, I came back and I said, now you do it. No, I'll work on it at home. Goodbye. All right.
Can I add one more thing?
You bet. I hope you do.
People don't realize when they're trying to do stuff like this is that they're tense from the waist down. So they'll be pushing on their stirrups and they'll be just waiting for the horse to do something wrong, not realizing that they're partially causing it.
That's a good point. Don't get in their wash machine.
So you gotta, when you're doing your one rein stop and then throwing them the reins, you have to be relaxed. You can't be holding your breath. You can't be pushing on your stirrups. You have to be relaxed.
Good point. Just think about that recipe for that cow pie casserole. And oh, by the way, horse, you need to walk. So yeah, it's a human element deal 99% of the time.
So to me, we've covered two things that I don't want people to get confused about. When you're coming home and your horse wants to jig, you're doing the one rein stop, or you're walking real slow. When you're heading out and your horse is looking around and acting fearful, then you get moving. You don't let him just creep around and look for stuff to spook at, because he's got to maybe keep his mind on staying upright because you're trotting through the brush.
And I hate to break it to you, but it's okay to ride by yourself.
Right.
That's a pretty good deal for a horse.
But if you are in a group and you're having trouble, those people need to be aware of it first so that they can plan their day, and so they have to agree to wait for you if you're shutting your horse down. Because if they're leaving, it's going to go backwards.
Thank you. Now, one of the biggest things that I really don't like that I see people do a lot of times is you'll be a couple 100 yards or quarter mile from the house, and they've been fighting their horse, and they'll say, well, I'm going to show you, and they make the horse stand still. Now, 7 of your best friends are leaving because they don't look behind them because they're thinking of getting back to the barn. So now you just told this horse, I'm going to get in a fight with you, and you're going to stand here, and by God, I'm the owner. And I'm thinking, okay. Well, the herd just left.
And you have
are
to go home
going to
sometime.
die.
And you have to go home sometime, so eventually you've got to leave that spot.
Yep. So, anyway, this is our goodwill video.
Well, what we do when we get home, which is opposite from a lot of people, is we don't immediately unsaddle the horse, bathe him, give him some treats, and turn him out. He has to do something at home when he gets home. So getting home isn't all that it's cracked up to be.
Like being hung.
Right.
He gets to stand there for a couple hours while I take a siesta.
Or he gets to work on the logs, or he gets to do all kinds of things. So getting home isn't a treat. All right, next subject.
All right. Tino says more California Mission Days history. Okay, you know that's my passion. All right, the Mission Days. It was a very small window. If you actually read and do the math, the California Rancho and the California Spade Bit Horse legacy had a very short window of beginning.
Like 40 years or something, right?
Something like that, because it was basically between when they seceded in the 1820s until the gold rush. After that, everything changed, but that's because of the settlers coming in. 1849 was the gold rush, and oh, by the way, that's when California became a state, which the Californios did not want. Okay. But what I want to tell you about is one of the traditions of the Californios. It was the sons of the men that came up as soldiers from Tubac and other places. They did the actual work on the ranches. The father, he pretty much let everybody know what to do, and the sons would take off. And one of their habits, which I always thought was pretty neat, because California's pretty haired over, especially where all the land grants were. And a group of riders, as in the natives, plus the sons of the Don, would go out and they'd gather a canyon. Half the crew would go up one side, half would go up the other side, work their way up the ridges. And then the Don's sons typically would be at the bottom. And while they were waiting, they would work on collection, whatever they were working on with their spade bit horses. But as the cattle came out, they would stop them at a certain point, a sycamore or a spring or a big rock pile or something, and they would rodeer them right there, meaning hold them, not let them go. So now everybody would be around this herd by noon, and they would sit. And these cattle, when they started to lay down, and you watched the Don's sons, when they turned around and rode away, everybody rode away. And those cattle would go back up into that canyon, come back to water, whatever they wanted to do. Because it was the law that you had to have an annual roundup. So every day these guys were horseback And one of the things they did a lot of was that gathering canyons, schooling the cattle. And the thing about the natives weren't allowed to ride and all that, that didn't last very long because the numbers got so out of hand, it was ridiculous. I mean, a ranch with thousands of horses, and you got 4 sons, you can't have that many sons. So the natives started riding pretty soon and found out that they were pretty darn good at it. I've always said that some of the best cowboys are Indians, so anyway, that's the story on that. That's a small piece.
Now, can we go back to the reason why you would have your cattle go and stop at a sycamore tree or something?
Oh yeah, because so when they had the annual roundup, they'd start them, and the cattle would walk out. Now these cattle were damn near feral. You got to know that. They weren't a bunch of pus-gutted Herefords. These were longhorn bred cattle. So anyway, the annual event of the rodeo, they were already used to coming out and stopping at a certain point. And then you would start moving them together and work them.
So you could just show up on a ridge, the cattle would walk down the hill.
Well, that's right. That's what you wanted. And the big trick, if there was one, because there's a term that kind of got lost in the cowboy world, is that during the roundup and during this exercise, there's a word called limpia, which means clean. And if you're going to clean it, that means that you ride into every coulee, every draw, every arroyo, and you bring them out. Because if you don't, that's how they start going to be feral cattle. And every state in the West that I've ever been around has feral cattle, no matter what they tell you. And it's because they're gathered too fast, too hard, too soon, and they go feral.
Nobody rides on them.
Well, there is that, but...
Now, we had the pleasure of working for Richard Rudnick, and for the first time in how many years? We gathered the cattle that we've been riding through, and...
Yeah, he turned us in, he brought up a bunch of cattle for us to ride on, and by the time he came up to get them, we walked them in. And a couple of the cowboys that were there mentioned it's the first time they'd ever walked into the corral. So, it does pay to ride on your cattle.
Okay, next.
All right, Freddie Lewis. This is the Montana crowd. Lady, which really tickled me. She's a rancher, pulled out of the lodge grass country and went farther over into Montana. But anyway, she caught me up on everybody. Freddie Lewis has died. He was 90-something. But his wife, Lois, was the best ranch cook I have ever sat at a table at on a ranch. She was professional, she was clean, she was always right on time, and she would get the groceries for this big crew on a ranch, plus she got all the groceries for the herders, because I was a camp tender, and she was the best. That's all there was to it. And anyway, Freddie was a legend because of the bronc riding. He was in the Turtle Association. Hale Jeffers was a local rodeo guy. Him and his brothers, they had a ranch there by Lodge Grass. And everybody remembers Hale, when he broke his back, he'd get on his knees inside the cab on the passenger side. And he'd put his elbows on the dash.
Because he couldn't sit in the seat?
He couldn't sit in the seat because his back was broke.
Oh, wow.
And his wife would drive him around. You'd see you coming down the road, looks like some little kid standing next to her. And that was Hale. So that's the last time I saw Hale, was him kneeling on the floor. But he's got his son running the outfit, and I got to talk to him a few years ago, and I know that place is in good hands, I'll guarantee you. So Hale Jeffers was good, and then slipping over to Bob Barnett. This list, folks, is important to me because people ask me, how'd you learn, who's your mentors? Well, I'm telling you about all the people that had some kind of an impact on my career. Bob Barnett ran the Curry Company horse and mule operation in Yosemite. Okay. The big deal about that was I personally got to get in on the drive. At the end of the year, we would take the horses after August and trail them up Cathedral Spires and get up on top of a place called McGurk Meadows by Glacier Point. And then we'd drop down into Wawona when we got ready to go south with them, or west, and 300 head of horses and mules in the 60s, and I got to go on the drive, which meant it was trotting for 3 days, 100 miles, and I thought I'd died and went to heaven. Now these were dude horses, so you'd go along, your horse get tired, so you just roped one in front of you, jerk your saddle off. We were on county roads mainly. Jerk your saddle, throw it on another horse, and take off again. So that's when I thought I'd really made it. But the Paul Harvey of it is, for those of you that remember, when I was gone in Vietnam, my grandma told me that Alan Funk, I think his name was the head guy on Canon Camera. He went on the last drive they had. Who'd have thought? So,
you gonna tell them about how you almost quit before you got started with that outfit?
well, they start you off in the shoeing barn because my uncle Lloyd Light and Dean Conway, them guys knew me from course school, and they knew my dad was a horseshoer. So I went to the shoeing barn, and it was like going into a free-for-all, and I just got beat up. Mules knocked me out of the barn, knocked me down, kicked me, everything they could think of. And everybody said, well, they got the planks in the barn loose, so they think they're walking across the bridge and they'll stand. That's not true. They didn't stand. They kicked the hell out of me. So when I was about to quit my first big job, I was walking up to Bob, and he could see it coming. He said, get on that horse and take these people out. So they just tested me, wanted to see if I could handle it. But anyway, that's how it went. And a lady told me that when in the 60s, when she was on her little Welsh pony at the Mariposa Fair, there were some cowboys there from course school that had their horses in the stock horse class. And she made a comment about how gentle and quiet and nice those colts were. So please understand that this was way before natural horsemanship. And she mentioned that, so I thought that was pretty cool. Now, the next one, get an update on Shoshone. Everybody's curious about Shoshone. Now, he come out of a feedlot by way of Mexico, but I got him in a feedlot down there by Casa Grande. And he was just a really good, double tough horse. I'm sure some of you remember I called him Snakes on the Ground because everything bothered him. Well, he got over that. Anyway, the man I day work for now, his wife needed a good trail horse. And I said, well, if you don't like the people you ride with, you can try this horse because he will leave him in the dust. He could walk and nod. So that's where he went, and she loves him, and Mike gets to use him on special occasions. So that's where he went. And Handsome, he went to our friend Mike up in Washington.
His dad.
And the horse was bought for him, his father, and his 10-year-old son. So there's, his dad's my age, so he's just a pup. But anyway, they have had a ball with the horse. And Mike got a hold of us a while back and said that he laid down a bull calf and tied off like I'd showed him. And castrated the bull calf, tied off, and Handsome just stood there. So he's thrilled, and I'm thrilled, and we're all thrilled. But, and 3 of our horses ended up in that Excalibur show over in Las Vegas. So if you're ever at that show and you see the non-Frisian horse, a 14-hand little horse loping along with some guy falling off the back of him, that's one of our horses out of Mexico. So we're kind of proud of that. And then there's a young man there in Georgia that got one of our bay geldings, and he sent us a video and pictures of him riding that horse. So we're proud of those deals. Anyway, that's what I've got to tell you. Our place is like Ellis Island. They come, I change their name, and they go. And
That's new material, and I'm proud of you.
Finally come up with something new, huh? All right, here's a good one. Thoughts on the Australian stock saddle and way of cattle work. All right, here we go.
Uh-oh.
The Australian stock saddle, I have no opinion because I have never ridden one.
I rode one time at Swatters.
Yeah.
And it was one of those combination ones. So it had the Western fenders and then the Aussie seat. And it wasn't bad, but it felt like I was sitting with my feet too far forward.
All right, well, there you go. But what I want to tell you is that the ships that left Europe and went to Australia were from Europe. Okay, so the people that landed there had been grow up around English style riding. Okay, they had to adapt because where the country they were in, there was going to be many, many more times of cattle than there was the entire population of Europe. So what they did was adapt the saddle to work for their stations. Okay, in America, when the ships left Europe, everybody brags about their, my cousin was on the Mayflower or whatever. Well, the fact is, it was the same thing on the immigrants coming to America. And what happened was, as far as I can tell, is that there was the English style riding came to the colonies, and it turned into the plantation saddle down the road because they had to change it for the vastness of the United States, just like Australia. So they changed the gear, and that's what they do. It's cultural. If you go down to South America, you're going to see the same thing. So my thoughts are that I've never ridden a stock saddle, and I understand it's a smart thing to do because you change for the environment. And the cattle work, same thing. They've been at this a while. So the Australian stations, and if you go up north, it's different than down south. And you got to know, if you've been to Australia at all, you'll find out that we torture Texans. Texans torture us. Okay, the California prune pickers. All right, it's no different in Australia.
And you got the Victorians and
the punchers down in Victoria running them good cherry red Hereford cattle are giving the boys up north a hard time, and the guys up north don't even acknowledge them as cattlemen, when who cares, and they're all cattlemen. But that's the nature of the beast. That's the way it works. So anyway, I don't have an opinion about them.
It cracked me up that it cracked me up that they call the Victorians Mexicans for some reason. I never did quite understand that.
It's in the south of the country. Well, where we're sitting here in California used to be Mexico.
Yeah.
So what I was going to tell you was, in the West, we got our culture from Mexico. Well, Australia is an island. Okay, the Aboriginal people, when they got there, were not riding horses. So that's the difference. All right, that pretty well covers it. Thank you.
Thank you.